Well, we wanted to have you on our show because, the three of us are kind of in the same boat that you are in our different verticals. And the two guys over here on the couch, Ben and Doug, have both gone through, obviously, special forces experiences, and they've had to deal with issues of PTSD and other things that they've dealt with, and are now in the boat of being kind of pro-cannabis and pro-psychedelics, which is tough to be in that boat as, a former military individual, and especially, a Navy SEAL, to come out and say, hey, we may need to look at this stuff from a scientific perspective on how it might be able to help our returning veterans and how it might be able to help humanity in general. And does it make sense for us to keep these substances as, Schedule I classified substances that you can't ever touch it or you go to jail type of thing? And so we wanted to have you on because you've been right from the beginning and you've stayed your course, and we really are gaining a large benefit from that because we may be able to rewrite the human origin story that we've been told from the time we were kids. And if that helps us get over some of the stories that we've been told about, not necessarily that, you don't want to poo-poo the idea of God, and none of us here in this studio would do that. But at the same time, if there are particular religious stories that may be dividing people, and having us understand the larger picture of where those stories might have come from and the reality that might have existed before the Garden of Eden story had been told or whatever it was, that might bring us together as a people. And we wanted to have you on as the person who stands in the face of the folks who are resisting you to say, no, let's follow the evidence on this. Let's be pragmatic. Let's certainly question it. Let's be skeptical about our own assumptions. But at the same time, we got to be ready to release the old ideas of what we believed yesterday so that we can move forward and become a better, more intelligent, more knowledgeable race of people and individuals.
Exactly. And yeah, I mean, we are in a time of tremendous ferment right now in terms of understanding our own past. And there are dogmas that have been entrenched since the 19th century. And old dogmas don't let go easily.
No.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, what was one of the times that you found that in your career? Like, you started laying this out about 10 years ago. What are some of the examples of the folks who have stood up and said, no, for absolutely no good reason? We don't have to throw an individual under the bus, but I mean, what are the
well, we can mention a few names, but
who's the biggest piece of shit you've ever talked to? and where does he live?
No, I mean, what kind of resistance have you had from the dogmatic science community?
Well, more, again, like I said, in the last decade or so, since I've been putting more stuff out there. But you know what? I relish getting challenged because, I've done my homework, and I don't claim to be 100% correct about everything because I'm not. Nobody is.
You'd be an insane person.
Yeah. I have a pretty good grasp of the scientific literature around the subject matter that I'm interested in. And I've done a lot of work in the field, and I've spent a lot of time out in the field with professionals who are considered to be some of the top in their field. And, I've discovered something interesting. Publicly, a lot of them will have one stance, but when you talk to them off on the side, they'll admit, we don't really have it all figured out. And maybe there is another angle to this whole thing. And that's the thing I've kind of discovered over and over again, that there are holes, very, very distinct holes within these prevailing dogmas. And, I have been, interesting. The last time I was on Rogan, talking about a lot of this, I'll give you an example. Two geologists. I was talking about the work of the late John Shaw, who is a Canadian geologist who has done tremendous work on deciphering drumlin fields, drumlin swarms, which is something we can talk about shortly because that's one of my latest passions is drumlins. But so he had a new interpretation of drumlins, which totally consistent with the idea of a major catastrophic upheaval at the end of the last ice age. His work was pretty much rejected by mainstream geological community for various reasons, only because the scale of what he was describing was so vast that nobody really wanted to wrap their heads around it. Because in Earth history, basically, the geological science the cornerstone of modern geological science has been uniformitarianism, which is that everything happens sort of gradually, incrementally, and it all has its modern counterparts. And so it's unscientific to invoke processes or scales or severity of events that are unlike anything that we've experienced since science was invented a couple of centuries ago.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Done.
The problem is, see, the uniformity principle is a very powerful diagnostic tool for understanding what happened, but it can also show us that, oh yeah, well, clearly there's this body of evidence that cannot be explained by reference to modern processes, right? And so anyways, after several episodes on Joe Rogan, one of the geologists that I'd actually been out in the field with on at least one occasion went online and called me a charlatan, right? He didn't back up anything. He didn't refute anything that I'd ever said. He just basically, the straw man argument. Basically, he created something that he, claimed that I was saying, which I was not. But then at the same time, another geologist who was a co-author of a seminal paper with John Shaw, who is one of the leading experts on drumlins in the world, contacted me and invited me out in the field with him. And so basically I went and spent 4 days in the field with him up in the drumlin swarms of central British Columbia. And so by contrast, we have two geologists, both part of the mainstream community. One of them calls me a charlatan. One of them says, "You're onto something, man. Come here. I want to show you something because it supports what you're onto."